Right now, somewhere over the Middle East, an F-16 is airborne. It is armed, it is fast, and its pilot is watching a threat board that has not been this active in decades. The aircraft beneath that pilot is not a new design. It first flew over 50 years ago. Yet, in early 2026, it remains the most common military fixed-wing aircraft in the world, with more than 2,000 examples in active service across dozens of nations. It comprises 15% of all active combat aircraft on the planet. No other fighter jet in history has been built in such numbers, sold to so many countries, or fought in so many wars. This is the story of the F-16 Fighting Falcon. We begin not in the past but in the present, because the present tells us something essential about the machine. The F-16 is not a museum piece. It is not a transitional aircraft waiting to be retired. In 2024 and 2025 and into 2026, the F-16 has been a central actor in active combat operations on at least two major fronts simultaneously. That fact alone demands attention before we trace how this aircraft came to exist and what it is technically capable of. In June 2025, the Israeli Air Force launched one of the most consequential airstrikes in modern history. In the early hours of June 13, 2025, a large formation of Israeli jets, including F-16I Sufa aircraft, struck targets across Iran. The operation, which Israel called Operation Rising Lion, targeted nuclear enrichment facilities, air defense networks, ballistic missile launchers, command and control infrastructure, and military sites spread across at least 14 Iranian cities, including Tehran, Isfahan, Qum, Karaj, and Kermanshah. Approximately 200 Israeli aircraft were involved in the opening phase of the strikes, hitting around 500 targets. The F-16I Sufa, which is the Israeli Air Force variant of the Fighting Falcon, played a leading role. Photographs released by open-source intelligence analysts showed these aircraft taking off with maximum fuel load configurations, each carrying 8 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs and 2 AIM-120B AMRAAM missiles. The GBU-39 is a precision-guided glide weapon designed to penetrate hardened targets, and the loadout seen in those images represented 48 guided bombs in a single group of 6 aircraft. The Sufa's conformal fuel tanks mounted along the fuselage extend its range by approximately 50% compared to standard F-16 configurations, enabling it to reach targets as far away as Iran without aerial refueling under certain mission profiles. The strikes destroyed multiple Iranian surface-to-air missile systems, ballistic missile launchers, and nuclear-related facilities. According to the Israeli military, the operation destroyed approximately 80 Iranian surface-to-air missile systems out of around 100 in the affected areas, 15 Iranian aircraft, 70 radars, 6 airports and air bases, over 35 missile and air defense production facilities, and dozens of command centers. Bombings managed to disrupt around 60% of Iran's ballistic missile fire during the 12-day conflict. The war between Israel and Iran lasted approximately 12 days and is now referred to by analysts as the 2025 Israel-Iran War. The United States, while not directly involved in Israel's initial strikes, responded to the conflict by massively increasing its own military footprint in the region. F-16s from the 480th Fighter Squadron at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany were among the first American assets repositioned. Those aircraft were described by analysts as among the most capable F-16 variants in the American inventory, specifically Block 50 jets optimized for suppressing enemy air defenses. Additional F-16s from Aviano Air Base in Italy and from the 169th Fighter Wing at McEntire Joint National Guard Base in South Carolina also began repositioning toward the Middle East, according to flight tracking data and air traffic control communications in the summer of 2025. By February 2026, that repositioning had accelerated further. New commercial satellite imagery from Chinese company Mizervision, published in late February 2026, showed F-16 Fighting Falcons deployed to Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia in the central Indian Ocean. accompanied by KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling aircraft, P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, and multiple strategic airlifters. The deployment signaled that the United States was preparing Diego Garcia as a potential platform for sustained operations in the event of further escalation with Iran. F-22s from Joint Base Langley-Eustis in Virginia were also observed arriving at RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, the same positioning that preceded Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, when 7 B-2 Spirit bombers struck Iranian nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. The Trump administration was demanding a new nuclear accord with Iran that would prohibit uranium enrichment, and the military buildup was a direct expression of that pressure. In that environment, the F-16 was functioning simultaneously as a deterrent tool, a defensive interceptor, and a precision strike platform. American F-16s deployed to the region were equipped with active electronically scanned array radars, making them significantly more capable of engaging low-flying drones and cruise missiles, the most prevalent threat being used by Iranian proxy forces throughout the conflict. The aircraft remained a core instrument of American power projection in the most volatile region on Earth. At the same moment, on the other side of the world, F-16s were engaged in a different kind of war entirely. Ukraine had received its first F-16s in August 2024, after years of lobbying by the Ukrainian government and extended training programs for its pilots conducted primarily in the Netherlands and Denmark. The aircraft came from NATO allies. The Netherlands committed 24, Denmark 19, Norway 12 with 10 additional airframes for spare parts, and Belgium pledged 30 for delivery through 2028. By early 2025, Ukraine had a small but operationally active fleet, estimated at between 16 and 18 airframes in country. The Ukrainian Air Force used its F-16s primarily for air defense, intercepting Russian cruise missiles, Shahed one-way attack drones, and ballistic missiles. A Ukrainian pilot was quoted as saying that over 80% of the missiles launched by F-16s hit their targets, including Shahed drones and cruise missiles. The aircraft proved effective in the intercept role, but the operational environment over Ukraine was extraordinarily dangerous. The first F-16 loss occurred on August 26, 2024, when Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Mez, call sign Moonfish, was killed during a large-scale Russian aerial barrage. Before his aircraft went down, Mez destroyed 3 cruise missiles and 1 attack drone. The cause of the crash was investigated, and the Wall Street Journal reported that a possible friendly fire incident involving a Ukrainian Patriot air defense battery may have been a factor, potentially related to the absence of the Link 16 tactical data network on that particular Patriot system. No final official finding was released that conclusively established the cause. The second loss occurred on April 12, 2025, when 26-year-old Captain Pavlo Ivanov, a former Su-25 pilot who had transitioned to the F-16, was killed during a combat mission in eastern Ukraine. The third loss occurred on May 16, 2025, when a pilot destroyed 3 Russian aerial targets and was engaging a fourth with the aircraft cannon before an emergency forced him to eject. He survived and was recovered by search and rescue teams. The fourth loss was reported on June 29, 2025, when Lieutenant Colonel Maxim Ustimenko, born in 1993, died after his F-16 shot down 7 air targets during a massive Russian aerial assault involving 537 projectiles. Ustimenko steered his damaged aircraft away from a populated area but did not have time to eject. By October 2025, Ukraine had confirmed the loss of 4 F-16s and 3 pilots. Despite those losses, the aircraft continued to operate, and the Allied commitments continued. These losses illustrated both the danger of the operating environment and the immense pressure placed on a small fleet of advanced aircraft defending a large country against a relentless aerial campaign. Simultaneously, Turkey, a NATO member that has operated F-16s since 1987, deployed 6 of its own F-16s to northern Cyprus in early 2026 to protect bases from potential Iranian threats, according to reporting from that period. Pakistan, another longtime F-16 operator, had been involved in its own complex situation. During the 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, Indian Air Force Chief of the Air Staff Amarpreet Singh claimed that 4 to 5 F-16s in hangars at PAF base Shahbaz were struck in Indian airstrikes. United States defense officials, however, told Reuters they were not aware of any F-16 being hit inside Pakistan, and that claim remained disputed. The F-16's global operational tempo in the 2024 to 2026 period was extraordinary. It was simultaneously engaged in or adjacent to an active conflict with Iran, fighting in a major European land war, subject to competing claims in a South Asian military confrontation, and serving as a frontline deterrence tool across multiple theaters. This is the aircraft we are examining, and its relevance today is not a legacy claim, it is a present reality. To understand why this aircraft is still here, still flying, still fighting, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to understand where it came from, what it was designed to do, and how it became something far greater than its designers initially imagined. The origins of the F-16 lie in the hard lessons of Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, American fighter aviation confronted a painful reality. The doctrine that had guided fighter development through the late 1950s and early 1960s held that air-to-air missiles had rendered the traditional dogfight obsolete. The thinking was that modern fighters would destroy each other at long range, well before they could close to visual range. This belief shaped aircraft design profoundly. The F-4 Phantom, the primary American fighter of the Vietnam era, was initially built without an internal gun, on the assumption that guns were relics of an earlier age. Vietnam proved that assumption catastrophically wrong. The new missiles were unreliable in combat conditions. Rules of engagement frequently required visual identification before engagement, which negated long-range missile shots. And the North Vietnamese Air Force, flying older MiG-17s and MiG-21s, was willing and able to close range and fight. American kill ratios were poor. The Navy and Air Force both launched efforts to understand what was happening and how to fix it. The Navy established its famous Top Gun School at Naval Air Station Miramar to improve dogfighting training. The Air Force had a group of officers and analysts who were reaching similar conclusions through a different path. At the heart of this effort was a man named John Boyd. Boyd was a fighter pilot and an intellectual, and he had spent years developing what he called energy maneuverability theory with mathematician Thomas Christie. Energy maneuverability, or EM theory, was a mathematical framework for predicting the performance of a fighter aircraft in combat. It characterized aircraft performance in terms of specific excess power, which describes how much energy an aircraft can generate beyond what is needed to maintain steady flight, and how that energy can be used to accelerate, climb, turn, or gain positional advantage over an adversary. Boyd's work showed, quantitatively, that agility and energy management were decisive in air combat. An aircraft that could rapidly change its energy state, accelerate quickly, pull tight turns, and transition from one maneuver to another faster than an opponent would win engagements. Boyd and a group of like-minded analysts, engineers, and officers who came to be called the Fighter Mafia argued that the American military was going in exactly the wrong direction. Bigger, heavier, more complex, and more expensive aircraft were consuming resources that could be better spent on more numerous, more agile, lighter fighters. Boyd argued for a small, lightweight, highly maneuverable fighter that would dominate in close air combat through performance rather than avionics complexity or weapon sophistication. The institutional Air Force was resistant. Leadership had committed to the F-15 Eagle, a large, expensive, and extremely capable twin-engine air superiority fighter. The fighter mafia was seen by some as a threat to the F-15 program and to the general direction of fighter development. But the arguments were compelling enough, and the Vietnam data was damning enough, that the Air Force agreed to fund a lightweight fighter prototype competition. In early 1972, the lightweight fighter program was formally launched. 5 companies were invited to submit proposals, and in April 1972, Two were selected to build flying prototypes. General Dynamics would build the YF-16, and Northrop would build the YF-17. The General Dynamics team, led by chief designer Harry Hilliker, embraced the energy maneuverability principles in their design. The YF-16 was radical. It was small, weighing roughly half as much as the F-15. It had a single engine, the Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofan, the same engine used in the twin-engine F-15, which gave the YF-16 an exceptional thrust-to-weight ratio. The aerodynamics were unconventional. The wing was blended smoothly into the fuselage, creating a lifting body effect that generated additional lift across the entire forward fuselage. Leading edge strakes, which are small aerodynamic surfaces running from the nose back to the wing root, generated powerful vortices at high angles of attack, dramatically improving the aircraft's ability to maintain control and generate lift in turning combat. The flight control system was perhaps the most radical feature. The YF-16 used a fly-by-wire system, meaning that the pilot's control inputs were converted to electrical signals that were sent to computers, which then commanded the control surfaces. This was necessary because the aircraft was designed to be aerodynamically unstable. Conventional aircraft are designed with inherent stability, meaning they naturally tend to return to straight and level flight if disturbed. This makes them predictable and safe, but also somewhat sluggish to maneuver. The YF-16 was intentionally designed to be slightly unstable, a configuration called relaxed static stability. In this configuration, the aircraft wants to depart controlled flight, but the fly-by-wire system continuously corrects for this, issuing commands many times per second to keep the aircraft on the intended flight path. The result is an aircraft that responds to pilot inputs with extraordinary quickness and sensitivity, because there is no natural inertia to overcome. The cockpit was also unconventional. Instead of a traditional center-mounted stick, the YF-16 had a side-mounted control stick on the right console. The seat was reclined at 30 degrees rather than the conventional upright position. Both features were designed to help the pilot tolerate high G-forces. In a hard-turning fight, the gravitational forces on the pilot can reach 9 times normal gravity. In an upright seat, this drives blood away from the brain, causing tunnel vision and eventually loss of consciousness, a condition called G-induced loss of consciousness, or G-LOC. The reclined seat and side stick allowed the pilot to sustain higher G-forces more comfortably. The canopy was a one-piece bubble design with no metal framing obstructing the pilot's forward view, giving the pilot exceptional visibility all around the aircraft. The first YF-16 was rolled out at the General Dynamics plant in Fort Worth, Texas, on December 13, 1973. It had been built in just 21 months, an extraordinarily short time for a high-performance jet. The aircraft was painted in a striking red, white, and blue color scheme. On January 20, 1974, the aircraft was at Edwards Air Force Base in California for high-speed taxi tests. General Dynamics test pilot Phil Ostracher was making a high-speed run down the runway when the aircraft became unstable due to the sensitivity of the fly-by-wire system, causing the right horizontal stabilizer to scrape the runway surface. Rather than abort, Ostracher increased thrust and completed an unplanned first flight of approximately 6 minutes, landing safely. The controls were adjusted, and the formal planned first flight took place on February 2, 1974, a flawless 90-minute sortie that reached 30,000 feet and demonstrated the basic capabilities of the design. The second prototype first flew in March 1974. Testing accelerated rapidly. The two YF-16 prototypes flew a total of 330 missions and logged 417 hours of flight time during the competition. The tests included live missile firings, gun firings, and air combat maneuvering against a wide range of aircraft, including the F-4 Phantom, F-106 Delta Dart, and even against secretly obtained Soviet MiG-17s and MiG-21s operated by the Air Force's classified Red Hats unit at a facility in Nevada. The YF-16 performed superbly in all of these engagements. At one point during testing, a YF-16 prototype took 3 straight engagements against an F-4, which had to return to base to refuel. The YF-16 remained airborne and then defeated a second F force sent up to continue the fight. In April 1974, the stakes of the competition were raised dramatically. Secretary of Defense James Schlesinger announced that the winner of the lightweight fighter competition would be developed into a full production combat aircraft under a new program called the Air Combat Fighter. The ACF was intended to supplement the F-15 with a cheaper, more numerous aircraft. Crucially, Schlesinger made clear that the ACF would be in addition to the F-15, not a replacement for it. This was critical because the mainstream Air Force had been concerned that the lightweight fighter concept would cannibalize funding from the F-15 program. With that threat removed, opposition within the Air Force largely evaporated. The competition expanded internationally as well. 4 NATO allies, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway, formed a group called the Multinational Fighter Program Group and pressed for a decision by December 1974. They needed a replacement for their aging F-104G starfighters, and the winner of the ACF competition would be a strong candidate. On January 13, 1975, Secretary of the Air Force John McLucas announced that the General Dynamics YF-16 had won the competition. He cited significant performance advantages over the competing Northrop YF-17 in agility, acceleration, turn rate, and endurance. The YF-16 had a mission radius advantage over the YF-17 of 200 nautical miles, a sustained turn rate advantage at supersonic speed, and a faster acceleration from subsonic to supersonic flight. The Air Force announced it planned to order at least 650 and potentially up to 400 production aircraft. The 4 NATO nations made their own decisions shortly afterward. Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway each ordered F-16s, with aircraft to be assembled not only in Fort Worth, but also at manufacturing facilities in Europe, under a cooperative production arrangement, spreading industrial work across multiple countries. This was an unprecedented industrial and political arrangement, and it ensured that the F-16 would have an immediate export customer base in Western Europe, creating scale economies and political momentum for the program. The production F-16A differed from the YF-16 prototype in several ways. The fuselage was lengthened by about 10.5 inches. A larger nose was fitted to accommodate the AN/APG-66 radar. Wing area was increased. 2 additional weapon stations were added. The tail fin height was reduced slightly. These changes added weight, but the aircraft remained significantly lighter and more agile than its contemporaries. The 2-seat variant, the F-16B, used the same airframe with the second cockpit added behind the first and an extended canopy covering both positions. The F-16B reduced internal fuel capacity slightly, but retained full combat capability. The first production F-16As were delivered to the United States Air Force in August 1978. Initial operational capability with the Air Force was declared in October 1980. The aircraft that entered service was already more capable than the prototype that had won the competition, equipped with fire control radar, a full weapons suite, and avionics that placed it at the leading edge of technology for its time. Let us now turn to what the F-16 is, technically and mechanically, because the depth of the design is not fully appreciated without understanding how each system contributes to the whole. The F-16 is a single-engine, single-seat, supersonic multi-role fighter. At its most fundamental level, it is powered by either a Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofan or a General Electric F-110 turbofan, depending on the variant. The F-100 series engines, used in Block 32, 42, and 52 aircraft, produce approximately 29,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner in their later variants. The General Electric F-110 engines, used in Block 30, 40, and 50 aircraft, also produce approximately 29,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner. The aircraft can reach a maximum speed of Mach 2 at altitude, or approximately 500 miles per hour. At sea level, the maximum speed is approximately Mach 1.2, around 915 miles per hour. The service ceiling is above 50,000 feet, with some sources citing a combat ceiling of approximately 51,800 feet. The aircraft is 49 feet 5 inches long and has a wingspan of 32 feet 8 inches. It stands 16 feet tall. The empty weight of the F-16C is approximately 18,238 pounds, and the maximum takeoff weight varies by block, ranging from 37,500 pounds for the Block 30 to 48,000 pounds for the Block 50 and 52. The aircraft has a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1 when lightly loaded, meaning it can accelerate while pointing straight up. This is an extraordinary capability that gives the pilot tremendous flexibility in maneuvering and energy management. The aerodynamic design of the F-16 builds on the YF-16 prototype with refinements made during development. The blended wing-body configuration creates lift across the entire forward fuselage, not just the wings, reducing drag and improving efficiency. The leading edge strakes, which are the aerodynamic extensions running forward from the wing leading edges along the lower fuselage, generate controlled vortices at high angles of attack. These vortices energize the airflow over the wing, delaying the onset of stall and allowing the aircraft to pull tighter turns at slower speeds than would otherwise be possible. The result is an aircraft that can sustain a turn rate of approximately 9 degrees per second in certain configurations, making it one of the most maneuverable fighters ever built. The flight control system uses a quadruplex fly-by-wire architecture, meaning there are 4 independent channels that must all agree before a command is executed. This redundancy protects against single-point failures. The side-stick controller in the cockpit has force sensors rather than movement sensors in its basic form. The stick barely moves when the pilot applies force. The computers read the force applied and translate it into control surface commands, smoothing out the pilot's inputs to prevent over-control while preserving responsiveness. The aircraft is designed to sustain 9 times the force of gravity, and the reclined seat and G-suit allow pilots to operate near that limit for sustained periods. The cockpit itself was a landmark in fighter design when the F-16A entered service, and has continued to evolve. The bubble canopy gives the pilot an unobstructed 360-degree view, which is a critical tactical advantage in combat. The heads-up display, or HUD, projects flight and weapons data onto the windscreen glass in front of the pilot, allowing the pilot to keep eyes outside the aircraft during critical phases of flight rather than looking down at instruments. Modern variants of the F-16 use large color multifunction displays, and the Block 50 and 52 aircraft and their successors use sophisticated glass cockpit architectures that consolidate dozens of individual instruments into integrated digital displays. The primary sensor in most F-16 variants is the AN/APG-68 fire control radar, developed by Northrop Grumman. This is a mechanically scanned pulse Doppler radar that can operate in air-to-air and air-to-ground modes. In air-to-air mode, it can detect and track targets at ranges of more than 40 miles and can support simultaneous engagement of multiple targets. The Block 50 and 52 versions use the APG-68 version 5, which featured digital terrain mapping and improved reliability. The Block 70 and 72 F-16V Viper, the current production variant offered for export, uses the AN/APG-83 Scalable Agile Beam Radar, which is a fully active, electronically scanned array, or AESA, radar. The APG-83 provides significantly faster processing, simultaneous air-to-air and air-to-ground modes, and improved performance against low observable targets. AESA radars are also significantly more resistant to jamming than mechanically scanned radars, and have lower probability of intercept, meaning they are less detectable by enemy electronic support systems. The Block 60, which was developed specifically for the United Arab Emirates Air Force and designated the F-16E and F-16F, uses the AN/APG-80 AESA radar, which is an earlier generation AESA developed by Northrop Grumman specifically for this variant. The Block 60 also features integrated conformal fuel tanks, an infrared search and track system, and the Falcon Edge integrated electronic warfare suite. The General Electric F110 GE132 engine in the Block 60 produces 500 pounds of thrust with afterburner, making it the most powerful engine variant fitted to an F-16. The aircraft's armament is built around a central theme of flexibility. The fixed internal weapon is an M61A1 Vulcan 20mm rotary cannon mounted in the left wing root with 511 rounds of ammunition. The Vulcan fires at a rate of approximately 6,000 rounds per minute and is the ultimate backup for close-range engagements. Beyond the gun, the F-16 has 9 external weapon stations, 1 at each wingtip, 3 under each wing, and 1 under the fuselage centerline. These stations can carry a wide variety of weapons, pods, and fuel tanks. Lockheed Martin has certified more than 300 carriage and release configurations for over 180 weapon and store types on the F-16, the broadest certification record of any fighter aircraft in service. For air-to-air combat, the primary short-range weapon is the AIM-9 Sidewinder infrared-guided missile, which has been in service since the 1950s and has been continuously upgraded to its present form, the AIM-9X Block 2. The AIM-9X features thrust vector control, allowing it to engage targets at extreme off-bore sight angles, meaning the pilot does not need to point the aircraft directly at the target before launching. When paired with a helmet-mounted cueing system, the pilot can simply look at a target and fire. The primary beyond visual range weapon is the AIM-120 AMRAAM, an active radar-guided missile that uses its own radar seeker in the terminal phase of flight to guide itself to the target, allowing the launching aircraft to turn away after firing. AMRAAM can engage targets at ranges of over 20 miles in some configurations. For air-to-ground work, the F-16 can carry virtually every conventional weapon in the American inventory. General-purpose unguided bombs include the Mk-82 500-pound bomb, the Mk-83 1,000-pound bomb, and the Mk-84 2,000-pound bomb. Laser-guided bomb kits, such as the Paveway series, convert these unguided weapons to precision-guided munitions by adding a laser-seeking nose section and control fins. The GBU-12 Paveway 2 is a laser-guided derivative of the Mk-82 and was one of the most extensively used precision weapons in the history of the F-16. The Joint Direct Attack Munition, or JDAM, adds an inertial navigation and GPS guidance kit to unguided bombs, creating weapons that can be released in all weather conditions and hit targets within a few meters. The AGM-65 Maverick is an air-to-ground missile available in multiple guidance variants, including television guidance, infrared guidance, and laser guidance. The F-16 can carry up to 6 Mavericks, making it an extremely effective platform for attacking armored vehicles, hardened targets, and maritime threats. For suppression of enemy air defenses, the Block 50 and 52 variants, often called the F-16CJ, carry the AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missile, or HARM, which homes on the radar emissions of enemy surface-to-air missile systems and destroys them. The Block 50 was specifically optimized for this suppression of enemy air defenses mission with a dedicated targeting computer and the HARM targeting system. The LANTIRN system, low-altitude navigation and targeting infrared for night, introduced with the Block 40 and 42 variants in 1988, transformed the F-16 into a capable night and all-weather attack platform. LANTIRN consists of 2 pods, a navigation pod that provides a forward-looking infrared image for terrain following and navigation at night, and a targeting pod that uses a laser designator and infrared camera to identify and precisely attack ground targets in darkness. The Block 40 variant was informally called the Night Falcon because of this capability. In later years, more advanced targeting pods replaced the LANTIRN system, including the Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod and the Lightning Targeting Pod, which provide higher resolution imagery, longer detection ranges, and improved precision. The electronic warfare systems on the F-16 have been continuously upgraded throughout the aircraft's service life. Basic self-protection comes from a radar warning receiver which detects and identifies radar emissions from enemy tracking or guidance systems, alerting the pilot to threats and their directions. Chaff dispensers release clouds of metallic strips that create false radar returns, confusing radar-guided missiles. Flare dispensers release pyrotechnic decoys that attract infrared-guided missiles away from the aircraft. More advanced jamming pods can be carried externally to actively disrupt enemy radar systems. The most recent development is the Integrated Viper Electronic Warfare Suite, or IVEWS, which leverages AESA radar technology to give the F-16 self-defensive electronic warfare capabilities comparable to those of fifth-generation aircraft. IVEWS was flight-tested in late 2024 and is designed as a fully internal, integrated suite that combines electronic warfare, active jamming, digital radar warning, and self-defense functions. The Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, or AUTO-GCAS, deserves specific mention because it represents one of the most important safety advances in the aircraft's history. Controlled flight into terrain, meaning situations where a perfectly functioning aircraft is flown into the ground because the pilot is incapacitated or distracted, accounted for 26% of all F-16 losses and 75% of all F-16 pilot fatalities according to Air Force statistics. AUTO-GCAS was developed by Lockheed Martin and entered service in late 2014. It monitors the aircraft's position, altitude, and trajectory continuously. If the system calculates that the current flight path will result in ground impact and the pilot does not respond to warnings, it automatically commands the aircraft to pull up and fly away from the terrain. Since entering service, the system has saved the lives of multiple pilots and prevented the loss of multiple airframes. The refueling system is a critical aspect of the F-16's global reach. American and most NATO F-16s use the flying boom refueling receptacle on the upper fuselage spine, compatible with the tanker aircraft used by the United States Air Force and most NATO air forces. Some export customers use probe and drogue refueling systems. Conformal fuel tanks, available on certain variants, including the Block 50 and 52 Plus and the Israeli F-16I, mount along the fuselage and carry an additional 440 gallons of fuel, extending range significantly without consuming external weapon stations. The F-16 Block 70 and Block 72, marketed as the F-16V Viper, represent the most advanced production version of the aircraft currently being manufactured. The Block 70 uses the F110GE129 engine, and the Block 72 uses the F100PW229 engine, both producing approximately 29,000 pounds of thrust. Both variants feature the APG-83 AESA radar, a new modular mission computer architecture, 3 large color multifunction displays in the cockpit, an advanced data link, infrared search and track capability, an updated electronic warfare suite, a helmet-mounted cueing system, precision GPS, AUTO-GCAS, and structural enhancements that extend the airframe service life to 12,000 hours. The Block 70 and 72 are projected to support operations until at least 2060, more than 80 years after the first production F-16A was delivered to the Air Force. The F-16 variants produced over the decades are numerous, and each represents a significant capability improvement over its predecessors. The original F-16A and F-16B were clear-weather, day-focused fighters with basic radar and a limited weapons suite. The F-16C Block 25, introduced in 1984, added the APG-68 radar, AMRAAM compatibility, and a significantly improved cockpit. The Block 30 and 32 added the ability to carry the AGM-88 HARM missile and switched to more powerful engines. The Block 40 and 42, the Night Falcon variants, added LANT-IRN capability and all-weather precision strike. The Block 50 and 52 were optimized for suppression of enemy air defenses, and represent the most capable non-export variants in the American inventory. The Multinational Staged Improvement Program, or MSIP, conducted through the 1980s and into the 1990s, systematically upgraded the F-16 fleet through 3 stages, adding new radar modes, improved avionics, GPS receivers, night vision-compatible lighting, digital flight control systems, and expanded weapons compatibility. The Common Configuration Implementation Program, a $2 billion modernization effort launched in 1998 and completed in the mid-2000s, standardized all American Block 40 through 52 aircraft to a common Block 50 and 52 base configuration, simplifying training and maintenance across the fleet. With the technical foundation established, let us now trace the F-16's path from its first combat use to the present, covering every major combat deployment and operation in which this aircraft has participated. The F-16's first combat engagement occurred before its most famous early mission. On April 28, 1981, an Israeli Air Force F-16 pilot downed a Syrian Mi-8 helicopter over Lebanon. This was the first air-to-air kill by an F-16 in any Air Force. But it was just 3 months later that the F-16 announced itself to the world in a way that no one who followed aviation could ignore. On June 7, 1981, 8 Israeli Air Force F-16A aircraft, drawn from the 110th and 117th Squadrons and based at Etzion Air Base near Eilat, conducted one of the most audacious long-range precision strikes in aviation history. The mission, Operation Opera, also known as Operation Babylon, targeted the Osirak nuclear research reactor complex at Tawaitha, approximately 17 kilometers southeast of Baghdad, Iraq. The reactor had been purchased by Iraq from France and was believed by Israel to be part of a program that could eventually produce nuclear weapons. The planning for the mission had been ongoing since at least 1979. A mock-up of the reactor facility was constructed in the Negev desert, and the 8 pilots, divided into 2 teams of 4, conducted numerous practice attacks against it. The mission was canceled or postponed multiple times before finally proceeding. On June 7, 1981, at 3:55 in the afternoon local time, the 8 F-16s, each carrying 2 2,000-pound Mark 84 general-purpose bombs under their wings, took off from Etzion, accompanied by 6 F-15 Eagles providing fighter escort. The route took the formation low, at altitudes between 150 and 300 feet, across northern Saudi Arabia, flying along the border between Saudi Arabia and Jordan, where radar coverage was sparse. After crossing into Iraq, the formation maintained low altitude to avoid detection. At approximately 5:35 in the afternoon, with the sun at their backs to complicate visual acquisition from the ground, the pilots lit their afterburners approximately 12.5 miles from the target, climbed to 8,000 feet, and dived at 600 knots, releasing their bombs at 3,500 feet. The 2 waves of 4 aircraft attacked in rapid succession. 14 of the 16 bombs hit the reactor dome. The massive structure was destroyed in approximately 2 minutes. Iraqi anti-aircraft gunners were caught off guard, and their delayed reaction meant no SAM-6 missiles were fired. Some gunfire was directed at the departing aircraft, but none was hit. 10 Iraqi soldiers and 1 French civilian engineer were killed. The entire Israeli strike force returned to base safely. The worldwide reaction was immediate and largely condemnatory. The United Nations Security Council issued a unanimous resolution condemning the strike. The United States suspended F-16 deliveries to Israel temporarily. But the strike had proven several things simultaneously. The F-16 could conduct extremely precise, long-range, unguided bomb delivery at ranges that exceeded its designed performance envelope. The aircraft's low radar cross-section, low-level penetration capability, and raw accuracy had made the impossible possible. Years later, when American forces entered Iraq in 1991, U.S. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney acknowledged that the Osirak strike had made the Gulf War coalition's job significantly easier. The Israeli Air Force would continue to develop intensive operational experience with the F-16 through the early 1980s. During the 1982 Lebanon War, Israeli F-16s participated in the Bekaa Valley air battle against Syrian surface-to-air missile systems and fighter aircraft. The 1982 Lebanon War was the most intense air campaign in the Middle East since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Israeli F-16s and F-15s combined to destroy large numbers of Syrian SAM batteries and shot down dozens of Syrian aircraft over the Bekaa Valley, most without any losses to Israeli fighters. The F-16 demonstrated exceptional performance in the turning, maneuvering engagements that characterized these air battles. While Israel was building its F-16 combat record, the Pakistan Air Force was doing the same on the other side of the world, and in an operational environment that would become one of the most remarkable in the aircraft's history. Pakistan had begun receiving F-16s in the early 1980s, under the Peacegate program. The Pakistan Air Force operated its F-16s along the border with Afghanistan during the Soviet-Afghan War, and from 1986 through 1989, Pakistani F-16s shot down at least 10 intruders from Afghanistan. These kills included 4 Afghan Air Force Su-22 fighter bombers, 3 Afghan transport aircraft, 2 Antonov An-26 transports and 1 An-24, and 1 Soviet Su-25 close air support aircraft. Pakistan was the second country after Israel to achieve combat kills with the F-16. The Pakistani kills demonstrated the aircraft's capability in a real border patrol and engagement role, and the Su-25 kill in particular showed the F-16's effectiveness against a capable modern aircraft from the Soviet inventory. The Gulf of Sidra incident in 1986 brought American F-16s into direct combat. In March 1986, the United States Navy conducted operations in the Gulf of Sidra, which Libya under Muammar Gaddafi claimed as its territorial waters. When Libyan forces engaged American aircraft with surface-to-air missiles, American aircraft responded by attacking Libyan SAM sites and naval vessels. F-16s from Aviano Air Base in Italy and from other bases participated in the operations, including strikes against Libyan radar installations and patrol boats. These engagements were brief and one-sided, with American forces suffering no losses while degrading Libyan air defense and naval capabilities. In April 1986, the United States conducted Operation El Dorado Canyon, the retaliatory strike against Libya following the bombing of a Berlin discotheque that killed 2 American service members. American F-111Fs operating from the United Kingdom conducted the primary strike. F-16s contributed to this operation in support and defense suppression roles. The first American F-16 air-to-air kills came not in open conflict, but in the enforcement of no-fly zones over Iraq in the years following the Gulf War. After Operation Desert Storm ended in February 1991, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France imposed no-fly zones over northern and southern Iraq to protect Kurdish populations in the north and Shia populations in the south from Saddam Hussein's air power. American F-16s flew thousands of patrols under Operations Northern Watch and Southern Watch. On December 27, 1992, a United States Air Force F-16D shot down an Iraqi MiG-25 over southern Iraq using an AIM-120 AMRAAM. This was not only the first American F-16 air-to-air kill, but also the first combat kill achieved by the AMRAAM missile anywhere in the world. On January 17, 1993, a U.S. AF-F-16C destroyed an Iraqi MiG-23 with another AMRAAM for the second American F-16 victory. But to understand the scale of the F-16's role in the Gulf War itself, we need to step back to 1991. When Iraq invaded Kuwait on August 2, 1990, the United States and a coalition of 35 nations responded with a massive military buildup in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf region under Operation Desert Shield. The coalition air forces that eventually assembled in the theater represented an enormous concentration of air power. The F-16 was the single most numerous aircraft in the coalition order of battle. Operation Desert Storm began on January 17, 1991, when coalition forces launched the air campaign that would last 43 days before the ground assault began. In those 43 days and the 4 days of ground combat that followed, 249 U.S. F-16s flew 340 combat sorties, the highest sortie count of any aircraft in the conflict. This number tells you something important about how the F-16 was used. It was not reserved for specific high-value missions. It was the workhorse, the aircraft that flew the most, the aircraft that delivered the most ordnance, the aircraft that covered the broadest spectrum of targets. The variety of missions was extraordinary. F-16s struck airfields, destroying Iraqi aircraft on the ground and cratering runways to prevent their use. They attacked command and control facilities, communications nodes, bridges, and logistics infrastructure. They hunted Scud missile launchers in the western Iraqi desert, flying thousands of sorties in an effort to interdict Iraq's capability to hit Israel and Saudi Arabia with ballistic missiles. They flew close air support missions against Iraqi ground forces, including the Republican Guard divisions that formed the backbone of Saddam Hussein's military. They flew defensive counter-air patrols, protecting the coalition's own forces and infrastructure from Iraqi air attack. The Block 40 F-16s equipped with LANTIRN pods flew at night with a capability that had not been available in the first generation of the aircraft, using infrared targeting to attack Republican Guard tanks and vehicles in darkness. In one mission on February 24, 1991, F-16s from the 10th Tactical Fighter Squadron targeted armored vehicles of the Tawakalna Republican Guard Division near an area that would become famous as the Battle of 73 Easting, using GBU-12 laser-guided bombs to destroy over 100 Iraqi vehicles in a matter of hours. This kind of precision, high-tempo close air support helped shatter Iraq's ground defenses and compressed what might have been a weeks-long ground campaign into 100 hours. The Package Q strike of January 19, 1991, was the largest F-16 strike in history and remains one of the largest precision strike packages ever assembled. 72 F-16s from the 388th Tactical Fighter Wing and the 401st Tactical Fighter Wing, accompanied by F-4G Wild Weasel suppression aircraft and F-15C fighter escorts, attacked the Tuwaitha Nuclear Research Center near Baghdad and multiple downtown Baghdad targets. The mission was extraordinarily complex and encountered serious difficulties, including bad weather, tanker rendezvous problems, and the departure of the Wild Weasels before the strike aircraft reached the target. 2 F-16s were shot down and their pilots became prisoners of war. The experience of Package Q led to significant adjustments in coalition strike planning, with greater emphasis on stealthy F-117 Nighthawks for heavily defended targets and smaller, more specialized F-16 packages for other objectives. The total F-16 losses in Desert Storm were 7 aircraft. 3 were lost to confirmed enemy action, 2 to radar-guided surface-to-air missiles, and 1 to a shoulder-fired SA-16. The others were lost in accidents and operational mishaps. Against those 7 losses, the F-16 flew 13,000 sorties, delivered enormous tonnage of ordnance, and contributed decisively to the destruction of the Iraqi military capability that had been one of the largest conventional armed forces in the world at the start of the conflict. Following Desert Storm, the F-16 was immediately drawn into the enforcement of the no-fly zones over Iraq that would continue until 2003. American F-16s flew thousands of sorties under Operations Northern Watch and Southern Watch, regularly exchanging fire with Iraqi air defense systems that probed the edges of the restricted zones. The 2 air-to-air kills of 1992 and 1993 came from this sustained operational presence. In December 1998, F-16s returned to offensive operations over Iraq as part of Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign intended to degrade Iraq's capability to develop weapons of mass destruction in response to Iraqi obstruction of United Nations weapons inspectors. F-16s struck command and control targets, military production facilities, and Republican Guard headquarters, the campaign lasted 70 hours before being called off. As Iraq simmered under the no-fly zones, the Balkans became the next major theater for F-16 operations. In 1994 and 1995, NATO employed air power to enforce a no-fly zone over Bosnia under Operation Deny Flight, responding to the civil war in the former Yugoslavia. American and NATO F-16s flew combat air patrol missions and conducted ground attack strikes against Bosnian Serb military targets that were endangering United Nations safe areas and coalition peacekeepers. The operations were initially limited but escalated significantly in late 1995 with Operation Deliberate Force, a concentrated bombing campaign that targeted Bosnian Serb military infrastructure and contributed directly to the Dayton peace agreement that ended the Bosnian War. In 1999, the F-16 flew in its most intensive European combat operation since the Cold War ended. Following the failure of diplomatic efforts to end ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, NATO launched Operation Allied Force on March 24, 1999. The 78-day air campaign, conducted entirely from altitude without the use of ground forces, targeted Serbian military and infrastructure assets throughout the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. American F-16s flew alongside aircraft from multiple NATO nations. Dutch F-16s flew extensively in the campaign. Norwegian F-16s conducted missions including attacks on Yugoslav radar installations, fuel depots, and command centers. Danish F-16s flew air defense and escort missions. One notable American loss occurred on May 2, 1999. An F-16 piloted by then Lieutenant Colonel David Goldfein, who would later rise to become the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, was shot down over western Serbia by the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade using a surface-to-air missile. Goldfein ejected and was recovered by a search and rescue team. The incident demonstrated that even the most capable pilots, flying the most capable aircraft, remained vulnerable to modern surface-to-air missile systems. The Kosovo campaign ended on June 10, 1999, with the withdrawal of Serbian military forces from Kosovo. The air campaign had successfully coerced Serbia into accepting terms without NATO ground forces entering combat, though the campaign's effectiveness and strategic lessons remained subjects of debate among military analysts for years afterward. The September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States produced one of the most unusual moments in F-16 history, when it became clear that United Airlines Flight 93 was headed toward Washington, D.C., and that fighters were scrambling to respond. 2 F-16s were launched from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. The pilots were given orders that both of them understood to be extraordinary. If the commercial airliner could not be turned away, they would be expected to use their aircraft to bring it down, because they had launched without missiles. The 2 unarmed F-16s were prepared to sacrifice themselves and their aircraft to stop the attack. Flight 93 never reached Washington. The passengers fought back against the hijackers, and the aircraft crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, before the F-16s could intercept it. The 2 pilots were then tasked with escorting Air Force One as it returned to Washington. These F-16 pilots were the first to launch under orders that contemplated using their aircraft as weapons, and they never had to execute that order. Within weeks of the September 11th attacks, American forces began operations in Afghanistan. F-16s have flown in Afghanistan since 2001, conducting ground attack and close air support missions throughout the long war. European participating air forces, a trinational group consisting of Danish, Dutch, and Norwegian F-16 squadrons, deployed to Manas Air Base in Kyrgyzstan in October 2002 to support Operation Enduring Freedom from that location. 18 aircraft flew missions into Afghanistan from Manas. Danish F-16s flew 743 missions from that base during their deployment. Norwegian F-16s returned home having completed 488 missions and 953 flight hours over Afghanistan. Dutch F-16s also flew extensively. The 3 European nations flew side by side with American aircraft throughout the campaign, demonstrating the multinational interoperability that the F-16's shared platform had made possible. One USAF F-16 was lost in Afghanistan on April 3, 2013 when it crashed near Bagram Airfield in Parwan province, killing its pilot. Operations in Afghanistan continued for years under various names as American and coalition forces rotated through, with F-16s providing close air support, armed overwatch, and strike missions throughout. The 2003 invasion of Iraq brought F-16s back to Baghdad and beyond. The aircraft participated in strikes against Iraqi military targets from the opening hours of the campaign on March 20, 2003. The invasion was rapid, with coalition forces reaching Baghdad in just 21 days. The only F-16 loss during the invasion phase occurred on June 12, 2003, when an F-16CG of the 388th Fighter Wing's 421st Fighter Squadron crashed near Baghdad after running out of fuel. American F-16s remained in Iraq for years afterward in the counterinsurgency role, conducting strikes against insurgent positions, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, and high-value targets. The conflict in Iraq dragged on for years, with F-16s flying daily combat missions in a very different environment than the high-intensity air campaign of Desert Storm. In 2011, American F-16s participated in the multinational intervention in Libya following the outbreak of civil war. Operation Odyssey Dawn, and later NATO's Operation Unified Protector, established and enforced a no-fly zone over Libya and conducted strikes against Libyan government military forces that were attacking civilian populations. Norwegian F-16s flew extensively in the Libyan campaign, dropping some 600 bombs on targets that included the residence of Muammar Gaddafi. Dutch F-16s also participated. 6 Dutch F-16s operated from Italy during the campaign. The intervention contributed to the eventual fall of the Gaddafi regime. In 2014, the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria prompted the formation of a new coalition. American F-16s participated in Operation Inherent Resolve, the campaign against the Islamic State that included strikes in both Iraq and Syria. Multiple allied nations brought F-16s to this campaign as well. Belgian F-16s, Dutch F-16s, and Danish F-16s all flew missions against Islamic State targets in this period. The campaign continued for years, systematically degrading the Islamic State's territorial control and infrastructure. In the broader Middle East, Israeli F-16s continued operations throughout this entire period. They struck targets in Lebanon during the 2006 Lebanon War, engaged Hezbollah infrastructure and military assets, and shot down Iranian-made UAVs launched by Hezbollah using Rafael Python 5 air-to-air missiles in 2006. Israeli F-16s participated in operations in Gaza during the 2008 and 2009 Gaza War and subsequent conflicts. On February 10, 2018, an Israeli F-16I was shot down over northern Israel when it was struck by an S-200 surface-to-air missile of the Syrian Air Defense Force during a mission against Iranian and Syrian targets near Damascus. The crew ejected safely in Israeli territory. An Israeli investigation concluded the loss was due to a crew error in not adequately responding to the missile threat. In 2019, the United States and Saudi Arabia conducted counterstrike operations against Houthi positions in Yemen using F-16s and other aircraft, as the Saudi-led coalition responded to Houthi attacks on Saudi territory. F-16s from coalition partners flew strike missions supporting the coalition's air campaign. Pakistan's F-16 saw further action during counter-terrorism operations in Pakistan's tribal areas. From 2009 onward, PAF F-16s flew hundreds of combat sorties in the Swat Valley and South Waziristan operations against Taliban militants, using 500-pound and 2,000-pound laser-guided and unguided bombs to attack caves, tunnels, training camps, and ammunition depots. Over 100 missions were flown in South Waziristan alone, and over 300 in the Swat Valley as of 2009. About 10 F-16s were fitted with high-resolution infrared sensors for reconnaissance before those operations. These missions demonstrated the F-16's utility not just as a high-end fighter, but as a close air support and counterinsurgency platform against non-state actors in challenging mountain terrain. The 2025 India-Pakistan conflict introduced a new dimension to the F-16's operational history. Indian Air Force Chief of the Air Staff Amarpreet Singh claimed that Indian strikes had destroyed 4 to 5 F-16s in hangars at PAF base Shahbaz. The United States denied any knowledge of F-16s being destroyed inside Pakistan, and the claim remained disputed as of late 2025. What is clear is that the F-16 was at the center of one of the most consequential military confrontations between two nuclear-armed states in decades, and its presence on both sides of the deterrence equation shaped the entire confrontation. Ukraine's integration of the F-16 into its order of battle, which we covered at the opening of this script, represents the most recent and ongoing chapter in the aircraft's operational history. The Ukrainian experience has reinforced lessons about the vulnerabilities of even advanced fighters in heavily defended airspace, the critical importance of integration with ground-based air defense systems through tactical data links, and the extraordinary demands placed on small numbers of highly trained pilots operating at the edge of physical and technical limits. But it has also confirmed the F-16's effectiveness as a modern air defense interceptor, capable of engaging and destroying cruise missiles, drones, and conventional aircraft in a high-tempo, high-stakes combat environment. Let us now step back and consider what the aggregate of this history tells us about the F-16 and its place in military aviation. The aircraft began its life as a proposal that the Air Force largely opposed. It was built cheaply, quickly, and controversially. It won its competition not because of institutional support, but because its performance was simply and clearly better than anything else being considered. It was the physical embodiment of a theory, the energy maneuverability framework, that a collection of outsiders had argued for against fierce institutional resistance. The men who created it, Boyd, Hilliker, Spray, and Christie among them, were in many respects fighting the entire direction of American military aviation, and they won. The aircraft they produced was not the aircraft that entered service, nor the aircraft that flew over Baghdad, nor the aircraft that struck the Osirak reactor, nor the aircraft that is protecting Ukraine's skies today. It is all of those things, and none of them individually. The F-16 is an idea about fighter aviation that has been continuously expressed in successive physical forms, each building on the last, each incorporating new technologies while preserving the core insight that agility, energy, and the pilot's ability to exploit both are the foundations of aerial combat effectiveness. The numbers are extraordinary. Over 600 F-16s have been built since 1976. As of 2026, 102 remain in active service across 25 or more nations, representing 15% of all active combat aircraft in the world. The aircraft has been built or assembled in the United States, Belgium, the Netherlands, Turkey, South Korea, Israel, Japan, under license as the F-2's structural basis, and Taiwan. The operators include the United States, Israel, Egypt, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Pakistan, South Korea, Turkey, Greece, Portugal, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Indonesia, Thailand, Venezuela, Poland, Romania, Morocco, Oman, Iraq, Singapore, and Taiwan, among others. No other Western fighter aircraft has achieved this kind of global distribution. The Lockheed Martin F-16V Viper Block 70 and 72, currently in production in Fort Worth, Texas and Greenville, South Carolina, carries the aircraft into a fourth generation of manufacturing and a projected service life extending to 2060 and beyond. New operators continue to acquire the type. New upgrade programs continue to extend the capabilities of existing fleets. The Integrated Digital Twin program, unveiled by Lockheed Martin in 2021, applies modern digital engineering tools to reduce the cost and time required for F-16 sustainment and upgrades, extending the economic case for the aircraft even further into the future. The story of the F-16 is in some ways the story of American military aviation in the last half-century. It is the story of an idea that was radical when proposed, and that turned out to be right. It is the story of an aircraft designed for one mission, day combat air superiority, that became one of the most versatile, multi-role platforms ever built. It is the story of a program that was supposed to produce a cheap, simple, expendable fighter that instead became arguably the most important fighter aircraft in the history of military aviation by any objective measure of production volume, operational use, combat record, and global proliferation. As of today, in the spring of 2026, F-16s are stationed on alert at bases across the Middle East, prepared to respond to Iranian threats at a moment's notice. They are flying intercepts over Ukraine, defending cities against Russian cruise missiles and drones. They are on patrol in South Korea, watching the North Korean border. They are flying training missions in Poland, reinforcing NATO's eastern flank. They are in the air over Taiwan's approaches, in the inventories of air forces that face some of the most demanding threat environments in the world. 50 years after Harry Hilliker and his team at General Dynamics drew the outlines of what would become the YF-16, that aircraft's descendants are still the most numerous combat aircraft in the world. The lessons of Vietnam that drove its creation, the energy maneuverability theory that shaped its aerodynamics, the fly-by-wire system that defined its handling qualities, the bubble canopy and the reclined seat, and the side stick that gave its pilot a fighting edge, all of those ideas proved not just correct but enduring. The F-16 Fighting Falcon did not get its popular nickname from official channels. The Air Force named it the Fighting Falcon, but the pilots who flew it, the crew chiefs who maintained it, and the mechanics who worked on its engines had another name for it. They called it the Viper. The name stuck because it fit. Fast, precise, dangerous, capable of striking with no warning from any angle, and surprisingly small for the damage it could inflict. The Viper. The last F-16s will probably leave service sometime in the 2040s or 2050s in the air forces that are already replacing them with fifth-generation fighters. Some nations will fly them even longer, but by that time, the F-16 will have served for more than 70 years in frontline combat operations, and it will have accumulated a combat record that no other fighter aircraft in history can match for breadth, duration, or geographic scope. From the Osirak reactor to the skies over Tehran, from Bekaa Valley to Baghdad, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the plains of Ukraine, the Viper was there. And today, it is still there.